Millionaire CEO's fake arrest humiliated the black maid in public until she discovers why he did it. You stole from me, Latasha. After everything I've done for you. William Belfort's voice cut through the morning air, slicing the peaceful garden atmosphere like a knife. His burgundy suit caught the sunlight as he towered over Latasha Hawkins, whose uniform pristine black with crisp white accents now felt like a prison jumpsuit under the stares of the entire household staff. Sir, please. I didn't. Latasha's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face as the police officer tightened his grip on her arm. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into her wrists. Silence! Belfort's voice boomed across the manicured lawn. I welcomed you into my home. I paid you well. And this is how you repay my generosity? By stealing confidential business documents? The other staff members, gardeners, kitchen staff, housekeepers, all stood frozen in a semicircle, their eyes wide with shock and something else, fear. No one dared to speak up. No one dared to move. Mr. Belfort found the copies in her uniform this morning. The security chief explained to the officer, his voice deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. Corporate espionage, plain and simple. Latasha's knees threatened to buckle. All she could think about was Zoe, her 7-year-old daughter, waiting at home. Who would pick her up from school? Who would give her the asthma medication she needed tonight? Please, she whispered, no longer caring about the tears or how her mascara must be running down her cheeks. My daughter. Should have thought about your daughter before you decided to become a thief. Belfort cut in, his blue eyes cold as ice. He turned to address the gathered staff. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Loyalty is rewarded in this house. Betrayal is punished. The police officer began to lead her away, past the rose bushes she had tended so carefully, past the fountain where she'd eaten lunch alone so many times, toward the service gate where a patrol car waited. Wait. Belfort's command stopped them. He approached Latasha slowly, his expensive leather shoes crunching on the gravel path. When he was close enough that only she could hear, he leaned in. Did you really think someone like you could take down someone like me? Something snapped inside Latasha. Through her tears, she raised her eyes to meet his something she'd never dared to do before. My neighborhood. My home. You're destroying people's lives for profit, she whispered back, her voice trembling but clear. A flicker of surprise crossed Belfort's face, quickly replaced by a smirk. Business is business, Latasha. Nothing personal. It's personal to me, she replied, suddenly standing straighter despite the handcuffs. Those are my neighbors, my friends, my daughter's school. Belfort's eyes narrowed. For a split second, something unreadable flashed across his face. Then he stepped back and nodded to the officer. Take her away. As the officer led her toward the gate, Latasha could feel the weight of the real documents pressed against her skin, hidden where no one would search. The copies in her pocket had been a decoy, a risk she'd calculated carefully, if she could just get these papers to the community organizer who'd been fighting the development. Mommy! The small voice cut through everything else. Latasha's head snapped up to see Zoe standing at the service gate, her small hand clutched in Mrs. Patterson's, the elderly neighbor who watched her before school. I'm sorry, Mrs. Patterson called out, her voice quavering. She insisted on saying goodbye before school when you didn't come home last night. I didn't know. Mommy, why are you wearing those? Zoe pointed at the handcuffs, her brown eyes wide with confusion and fear. The world seemed to stop. Latasha couldn't breathe. Not like this. Not in front of her daughter. Behind her, she heard Belfort's sharp intake of breath. Officer. Belfort's voice had changed, carrying a note she'd never heard before. A moment. Please. What happened next would change everything but standing there, watching her daughter's tears begin to fall. Latasha couldn't imagine how she would ever recover from this moment of complete humiliation. Welcome to Mr. Lovely Stories. Before we continue, click that subscribe button, like this video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It brings me great joy knowing that these stories and lessons get to people all over the world. Your support helps us bring more powerful life lessons. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get back to the story. 3 weeks earlier, Latasha Hawkins' alarm blared at 4:15 a.m., the same way it had every weekday for the past 3 years. She silenced it quickly, not wanting to wake Zoe, who slept peacefully in the twin bed across their small bedroom. "Another day, another dollar," she whispered to herself, the mantra both a comfort and a reminder of why she did this. Their apartment in Riverdale Heights wasn't much a one-bedroom with faded wallpaper and temperamental plumbing, but it was home. Latasha had transformed the living room into her own bedroom, giving Zoe the privacy of the actual bedroom. Photos lined every surface. Zoe's first day of school, Latasha's late mother holding baby Zoe, the two of them at the community park. Latasha showered quickly, the lukewarm water never quite heating up properly, and dressed in her uniform. Black dress, white apron, sensible shoes that wouldn't make noise on the marble floors of Oakwood Manor. She applied minimal makeup. Mr. Belfort preferred his staff to look presentable, but not distracting. Before leaving, she knelt beside Zoe's bed. "I love you to the moon and back," she whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. Zoe stirred slightly. "And to the stars and home again," she mumbled sleepily, completing their ritual. Mrs. Patterson was already awake, waiting in her apartment across the hall. The 72-year-old widow had become like family over the years. "Morning, honey," Mrs. Patterson said, handing Latasha a travel mug of coffee. "I made extra banana bread for Zoe's lunch." "You're an angel," Latasha said, hugging the older woman. "I should be back by 7 tonight. There's a dinner party, but I'm not on serving duty." "Take your time. That child is a joy," Mrs. Patterson assured her. "Though she's been coughing more at night. Did you refill her inhaler?" Latasha's smile faltered. "I'm picking it up tomorrow. The price went up again, so I had to wait for payday." The bus ride to Oakwood Manor took 45 minutes, crossing an invisible line between struggling neighborhoods and estates with manicured lawns. Latasha used the time to review Zoe's homework from the night before and plan weekend activities they could do for free. By 6 a.m., she was walking through the service entrance of Oakwood Manor, the massive estate owned by William Belfort. The house itself was over 15,000 square feet, a modern castle of glass, stone, and privilege. "Morning, Latasha," called Jerome, the groundskeeper, already tending to the east garden. "Morning," she replied with a small smile. "Looks like rain later." "Mr. Belfort won't like that. The garden party's at 4. Latasha nodded, making a mental note to prepare indoor arrangements just in case. Mr. Belfort hated contingency plans. He expected perfection the first time, but she'd learned to prepare for his demands before he made them. In the staff quarters, she found Maria, the cook, already preparing breakfast. "He's in a mood," Maria warned, not looking up from her chopping. "The Reynolds deal is giving him trouble." "When isn't he in a mood?" Latasha replied, tying her apron more securely. "Fair point, but be careful today. He fired Gabriella yesterday." Latasha paused. "What? Why?" "She spilled coffee on some papers. Not even important ones." Maria crossed herself. 3 years working here, and out the door like yesterday's trash. A knot formed in Latasha's stomach. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with Zoe's school expenses and medical bills. At precisely 7 a.m., William Belfort emerged from his bedroom suite. At 45, he maintained the physique of a man 10 years younger through daily personal training sessions and a diet most people couldn't afford. His salt and pepper hair was always perfectly styled, his clothes always designer brands. Latasha had his coffee ready black, with exactly 1 teaspoon of raw honey from his private apiary. "Good morning, Mr. Belfort," she said, eyes appropriately lowered. He took the coffee without acknowledgement, already scrolling through his phone. "The blue suite needs to be prepared for Mr. Harrington. He's staying overnight after the party." "Yes, sir, it's already been prepared." He looked up, a flicker of surprise quickly replaced by his usual cool demeanor. "The Reynolds file needs to be on my desk by 9. "I placed it there last night, sir, along with the updated projections you requested." For a moment, something like approval crossed his face. At least someone in this house knows how to do their job properly. It wasn't quite praise, but in the world of William Belfort, it was close enough. Latasha had learned to take these small victories where she could find them. The morning passed in a blur of activity, overseeing the other housekeepers, arranging flowers, ensuring everything was perfect for the afternoon garden party. Belfort Enterprises was closing a major deal, and important clients would be present. At noon, Latasha took her lunch break in the small staff room off the kitchen. She unwrapped her simple sandwich and opened a worn paperback, a romance novel she'd picked up at the community book exchange. Dreaming of Prince Charming? The voice made her jump. William Belfort stood in the doorway, an unusual place for him to be. He rarely ventured into the staff areas. "Just my lunch break, sir," she said, quickly putting the book away. He entered the room, looking around with mild curiosity, as if seeing it for the first time. Perhaps he was. "You've been here 3 years now," he said, not really a question. "Yes, sir. 3 years next month." He nodded, studying her in a way that made her uncomfortable. "You have a daughter, correct? What was her name again?" The fact that he knew she had a daughter at all surprised her. "Zoe. She's 7. And her father?" Latasha stiffened. "Not in the picture, sir." Belfort nodded again, as if confirming something to himself. "The party today is important, Latasha. The Reynolds family is old money, very traditional. Everything must be perfect." "I understand, sir." "I know you do. That's why you're still here." He turned to leave, but paused. "Your daughter, she has asthma, doesn't she?" The question caught her completely off guard. "Yes, sir." "How did you—" "I make it my business to know everything about the people who work for me." His expression was unreadable. "Carry on." As he left, Latasha felt a chill run down her spine. Why would William Belfort care about Zoe's medical condition, and why bring it up now? The afternoon garden party was in full swing when Latasha overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. She was arranging fresh flowers near the outdoor bar when Belfort's voice carried over from a nearby seating area. "Riverdale Heights is a gold mine waiting to happen," he was saying to an older man with a shock of white hair. "The zoning board meeting is next week, but it's already a done deal. I've got 3 council members in my pocket." "What about the current residents?" the older man asked. Belfort laughed, a sound Latasha had rarely heard. "Minimum legal compensation, of course. Most of them are renters anyway. The property values are so depressed that buying them out is pocket change compared to what we'll make on the luxury development. And the school? The community center?" "Collateral damage," Belfort said dismissively. "Progress has its price, Charles. Riverdale Heights. Her neighborhood. Her home. Zoe's school." Latasha's hands trembled so badly, she nearly dropped the crystal vase she was holding. Somehow, she managed to finish her task and slip away without being noticed, her mind racing with implications. That night, after returning home and tucking Zoe into bed, Latasha sat at their small kitchen table staring at the pile of bills. The latest one, Zoe's asthma medication, had nearly doubled in price. The landlord had also slipped a notice under their door warning of a possible rent adjustment in the coming months. Now she understood why. "What am I going to do?" she whispered to the empty room. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a star, was a drawing Zoe had made. "My Future." The title read in careful second-grade handwriting. It showed a house with a yard, Zoe in a graduation cap, and Latasha smiling beside her. In that moment, looking at her daughter's dreams sketched in crayon, Latasha made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, Latasha arrived at Oakwood Manor with a new sense of purpose. The knowledge of Belfort's plans for Riverdale Heights weighed heavily on her, but she forced herself to maintain her usual demeanor. She couldn't afford to raise suspicions, not when so much was at stake. "Morning, Latasha," Jerome called from the garden. Today, he looked troubled. "Everything okay?" she asked, pausing on her way to the service entrance. Jerome glanced around before speaking in a low voice. "My sister lives in Riverdale Heights. Says there's rumors about some big development coming in, forcing everyone out." Latasha's heart skipped a beat. "I've heard the same," she admitted carefully. "You think it's true?" "My sister's got 3 kids. Just got settled in that apartment after the divorce." "I don't know," Latasha lied, hating herself for it. "But if I hear anything concrete, I'll let you know." Inside, the manor was buzzing with activity. The Reynolds deal was moving forward, and Belfort had scheduled meetings throughout the day. Latasha went about her duties methodically, her mind working on a plan. At 10 o'clock, she was dusting the antique bookshelves in Belfort's study when he entered unexpectedly, accompanied by two men in expensive suits. "Just need to finalize the paperwork before the zoning board meeting," one was saying. They stopped abruptly when they noticed Latasha. "Out," Belfort ordered without preamble. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I didn't know you'd be." "Now, Latasha." She nodded and quickly gathered her cleaning supplies, keeping her eyes down. As she reached the door, one of the men spoke. "Is that the help you were telling us about, Will? The one with the kid in Riverdale?" Latasha froze, her hand on the doorknob. "Yes," Belfort replied, his voice casual. "Ironic, isn't it? She has no idea she's cleaning the house of the man who's about to demolish her home." The men laughed, a rich, entitled sound that made Latasha's skin crawl. "Will she be easy to remove?" the other man asked, as if discussing a piece of furniture. "They all will be," Belfort assured him. "Most don't have the resources to fight back. A few $100s in relocation assistance, and they'll scatter like roaches when the lights come on." Latasha's fingers tightened around the doorknob so hard her knuckles turned white. Roaches, that's how he saw them. How he saw her. "Latasha," Belfort's voice sharpened. "I said you can go." She turned slightly, just enough to meet his gaze directly, something she'd never done before. For one electric moment, their eyes locked. She saw a flicker of surprise in his. "Yes, Mr. Belfort," she said, her voice steady despite the rage and humiliation burning inside her. "I'll be sure to finish cleaning later. Thoroughly." Something in her tone must have registered, because his eyes narrowed slightly. But she was already closing the door behind her, heart pounding in her chest. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. The casual cruelty, the dismissal of an entire community's worth, it was worse than she'd imagined. And he'd known all along that she lived there. Had probably known when he hired her. That afternoon, Latasha was arranging fresh flowers in the main foyer when Mrs. Belfort returned from her shopping trip. Clarissa Belfort was 20 years younger than her husband, a former model with a perpetual look of bored disdain. "Those roses are wilting," she commented, dropping her shopping bags for Latasha to collect. "William hates imperfection. You should know that by now." "They were delivered fresh this morning, ma'am," Latasha replied, keeping her voice neutral. "But I'll replace them immediately." "See that you do." Clarissa paused, examining Latasha with cool assessment. "You know, William mentioned your neighborhood is being redeveloped soon. Such a shame." The false sympathy made Latasha's stomach turn. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sure you'll find somewhere suitable." Clarissa waved her hand dismissively. Though housing costs are simply outrageous everywhere these days, even the less desirable areas. Latasha bit the inside of her cheek. "Is there anything else you need, Mrs. Belfort?" "Actually, yes. We're hosting the mayor for dinner next week. It's about some boring zoning thing William's working on." Clarissa smiled thinly. "You'll need to stay late." "I assume that won't be a problem?" "The mayor, coming here to discuss the rezoning of Riverdale Heights." Latasha's mind raced with possibilities. "No problem at all, Mrs. Belfort." "Good. Oh, and Latasha?" Clarissa's voice dropped to a stage whisper. "You might want to start looking for a new place to live. William always gets what he wants." With that parting shot, she glided up the grand staircase, leaving Latasha standing amid shopping bags worth more than her monthly salary. That evening, after returning home, Latasha sat at the community center's public computer. Zoe was at her weekly art class down the hall, giving Latasha a precious hour to research. She searched for information about Belfort Enterprises' development plans, zoning laws, and community rights. Most of it was confusing legal jargon, but one thing became clear. If she could prove Belfort was bribing city officials, the entire project could be derailed. "What you working on?" The voice belonged to Marcus Jenkins, a community organizer who ran youth programs at the center. Latasha quickly minimized the window. "Just some research." Marcus leaned against the desk. "About Riverdale Heights getting bulldozed?" "Because that's what everyone's talking about." She looked up, surprised. You know about that? Rumors started last week. Some big developer buying up properties, pressuring the city council. He studied her face. You know something, don't you? Latasha hesitated. Marcus had grown up in Riverdale Heights, had turned down college scholarships to stay and help the community. If anyone could be trusted, it was him. I work for him, she said quietly. William Belfort. I'm his housekeeper. Marcus's eyes widened. Belfort? He's behind this? She nodded. I overheard him talking about it. The zoning board meeting is next week. He's already got council members in his pocket, as he put it. Damn. Marcus ran a hand over his close-cropped hair. We need proof, Latasha. Something concrete we can take to the press or the district attorney. I know. She glanced toward the classroom where Zoe was painting, blissfully unaware that her world was about to be upended. And I think I know how to get it. The next day was Sunday, Latasha's day off. But as she helped Zoe with her homework, her mind kept returning to Belfort's study, to the files that must be there, to the evidence she needed. Mommy, you're not listening, Zoe complained, tugging at her sleeve. I'm sorry, baby. Latasha refocused on the math worksheet. What was the question again? If I have 12 cookies and give away 5, how many do I have left? 7. Latasha answered automatically. Zoe giggled. I know that, Mommy. But the problem says I eat 2 more. So how many are left? 5. Latasha corrected herself, smiling. You're getting so good at math, Zoe. Ms. Wilson says I could be an engineer someday. Zoe beamed with pride. I want to build bridges and tall buildings. The innocence of her daughter's dreams made Latasha's resolve strengthen. Zoe deserved a chance to fulfill those dreams, and so did every other child in Riverdale Heights. Monday morning arrived with a thunderstorm that matched Latasha's mood. She'd made her decision. Today, she would look for evidence in Belfort's study. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Belfort left for an early meeting downtown, and Mrs. Belfort was at her weekly spa appointment. The house was relatively quiet, with only the kitchen staff preparing for lunch. Latasha entered the study under the pretense of cleaning. She worked methodically, dusting and straightening while scanning for anything related to Riverdale Heights. The desk was locked, but she knew Belfort kept a spare key in the Chinese porcelain vase on the bookshelf. She'd seen him retrieve it once when he'd forgotten his key ring. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the desk and began carefully searching through the drawers. In the bottom right drawer, she found a folder labeled Project Riverside. Her heart pounding, she opened it. Inside were documents confirming her worst fears. Detailed plans for luxury condominiums, cost analyses, profit projections. And most damning of all, a list of consulting fees paid to 3 city council members and the head of the zoning board. Latasha quickly used her phone to photograph each page, her hands shaking so badly she had to retake several shots. She was so focused on the task that she didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway until it was almost too late. She barely had time to return the folder to the drawer and lock the desk before the door opened. William Belfort stood there, his expression unreadable. Latasha, I thought you'd be done with the study by now. She straightened, clutching her dusting cloth like a shield. Just finishing up, sir. The storm brought in extra dust through the windows. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on the desk. Did you move anything on my desk? No, sir. I know better than to disturb your papers. He approached slowly, like a predator stalking prey. You seem nervous today, Latasha. Just tired, sir. Zoe had an asthma attack last night. It wasn't a lie, her daughter's condition had worsened with the stormy weather. Something flickered across Belfort's face. Concern? Guilt? It was gone too quickly to identify. I see. He sat at his desk, testing the drawer subtly. Finding it locked, he seemed to relax slightly. You can finish later. I need the room now. Of course, sir. Latasha gathered her cleaning supplies, willing her hands to stop shaking. As she reached the door, Belfort spoke again. Latasha? She turned, heart in her throat. Yes, sir? How is your daughter's medication working? The new prescription can be expensive, I hear. The question caught her off guard. How did he know about Zoe's prescription? It's managing her symptoms, sir. He nodded, already turning his attention to his computer. Good. That's good. In the hallway, Latasha leaned against the wall, her legs weak with relief and confusion. Had he suspected something? And what was with the questions about Zoe's medication? She didn't have time to dwell on it. She had what she needed, evidence of corruption that could stop Belfort's plans. Now she just had to get it to Marcus without being caught. Have you ever risked everything you've worked for to stand up for what's right, even when the odds seemed impossible? That evening, Latasha met Marcus at the community center after her shift. Rain pounded against the windows as she transferred the photos from her phone to his laptop. "This is gold, Latasha," Marcus said, scrolling through the images. "Straight-up bribery. The press will eat this up." "Will it be enough to stop the development?" she asked, watching Zoe play basketball with some other kids across the gym. Marcus's expression grew serious. "It's a start, but Belfort has deep pockets and deeper connections. We need more, something that proves he knew these payments were illegal." "I'll keep looking," Latasha promised. "The mayor's coming to dinner next week. Maybe I can get something then." "Be careful," Marcus warned. "Men like Belfort don't play by the rules. If he catches you—" The unfinished sentence hung between them, heavy with implication. "I don't have a choice," she said simply. "None of us do." The next morning, Latasha arrived at Oakwood Manor to find the household in chaos. Belfort was shouting into his phone in the main hall, his face flushed with anger. "I don't care what it takes. Find out who leaked it!" He noticed Latasha and abruptly lowered his voice, turning away. Maria caught Latasha's arm in the kitchen. "Something big happened," she whispered. "Mr. Belfort's been on the phone since dawn. Mrs. Belfort is stress shopping in the city." "Any idea what it's about?" Latasha asked, trying to sound merely curious. "Something about a project being delayed. The staff is walking on eggshells." Throughout the morning, Latasha caught snippets of Belfort's conversations enough to realize that someone had tipped off a local reporter about the Riverdale Heights development. It wasn't the evidence she'd gathered with Marcus. They hadn't released that yet, but the publicity was already causing problems. Around noon, Belfort summoned the entire household staff to the main hall. He stood on the grand staircase, looking down at them with cold fury. "It has come to my attention," he began, his voice dangerously calm, "that someone in this house has been discussing my business affairs outside these walls." A ripple of unease passed through the assembled staff. Latasha kept her expression neutral, though her heart hammered in her chest. "Let me be perfectly clear," Belfort continued. "Every one of you signed a non-disclosure agreement when you were hired. Breaking that agreement is grounds for immediate termination and legal action." His eyes swept over the group, lingering briefly on Latasha. "Furthermore, effective immediately, all staff will surrender their phones upon arrival each morning. They will be returned when you leave. Any staff member found with a personal device during working hours will be terminated." Gasps and murmurs broke out. Many staff members relied on their phones to check on children or elderly parents during the day. "That's not fair." The protest came from Darlene, one of the younger housekeepers. "My mom's in hospice. I need to be reachable." Belfort's gaze hardened. "The house phones are available for emergencies. If that arrangement doesn't work for you, Ms. Wilson, you're free to seek employment elsewhere." Darlene fell silent, tears welling in her eyes. "One last thing," Belfort added. "I'm offering a $10,000 reward to any staff member who can identify the person leaking information about my business. Loyalty will be generously rewarded. Betrayal will be severely punished. That is all." As the staff dispersed, Latasha felt eyes on her. Turning, she found Belfort watching her with an inscrutable expression. She met his gaze briefly before looking away, her mind racing. Without her phone, gathering more evidence would be nearly impossible. That afternoon, as Latasha was preparing guest rooms for the mayor's visit, Mrs. Belfort appeared in the doorway. "William tells me you live in that dreadful neighborhood he's redeveloping," she said without preamble. Latasha stiffened. "Riverdale Heights. Yes, ma'am." "How? Unfortunate for you." Clarissa examined her manicure. "Though I suppose you'll receive some compensation." "Not much, but something. My daughter's school is there," Latasha said quietly. "Our doctor, our community." Clarissa waved a dismissive hand. "There are schools everywhere. And really, Latasha, wouldn't you prefer your daughter attend somewhere better? The schools in Riverdale Heights are hardly adequate." The condescension in her tone made Latasha's blood boil, but she maintained her composure. Zoe is thriving there. Her teachers care about her. Yes. Well, caring doesn't get you into college, does it? Clarissa smiled thinly. William mentioned your daughter has health issues. Asthma, isn't it? Such a shame. The repeated mention of Zoe's condition sent a chill down Latasha's spine. Is there something specific you needed, Mrs. Belfort? Just checking that everything will be perfect for the mayor. Clarissa's eyes narrowed. William's been under such stress lately. Someone's been causing trouble with his Riverdale project, leaking information to reporters. I hadn't heard, ma'am. Haven't you? Clarissa stepped closer. You know, William has always spoken highly of your work. It would be a pity if he had to reconsider your position here. The threat was thinly veiled. Latasha swallowed hard. I understand, Mrs. Belfort. I'm sure you do. Clarissa turned to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and Latasha? If you're smart, you'll start looking for a new place to live. Somewhere far from Riverdale Heights. For your daughter's sake. After Clarissa left, Latasha sat heavily on the edge of the guest bed, her hands trembling. The Belforts' interest in Zoe was becoming increasingly disturbing. It felt personal now, not just business. That evening, without her phone, Latasha had no way to contact Marcus about the new developments. She hurried home, anxiety gnawing at her stomach. She found Zoe and Mrs. Patterson at their kitchen table, Zoe's homework spread out between them. Mommy! Zoe jumped up for a hug. Mrs. Patterson helped me with my science project. We made a volcano. Latasha embraced her daughter tightly. That's wonderful, baby. Mrs. Patterson gave her a concerned look over Zoe's head. There was a man asking questions in the building today, she said quietly. About you. Latasha's blood ran cold. What kind of questions? How long you've lived here, where you work, if you've been involved in any community organizing. The elderly woman frowned. He said he was from the property management company, but I've never seen him before. Did he ask about Zoe? Mrs. Patterson nodded grimly. I didn't tell him anything. Said I was just a neighbor who didn't know you well. Latasha's mind raced. Belfort was investigating her, which meant he suspected something. Thank you, she whispered to Mrs. Patterson, for protecting us. After dinner and putting Zoe to bed, Latasha paced their small living room. She needed to warn Marcus, but without her phone, she had no way to contact him until morning. A knock at the door startled her. Cautiously, she approached and looked through the peephole. Jerome, the groundskeeper from Oakwood Manor, stood in the hallway. She opened the door a crack, chain still in place. Jerome? What are you doing here? Can I come in? He asked, glancing nervously down the hall. It's important. Latasha hesitated, then unlatched the chain. Jerome entered quickly, declining her offer to sit. I don't have much time, he said in a low voice. Belfort has people watching your building. I had to be careful coming here. Why would you risk that? Latasha asked, bewildered. Jerome took a deep breath. Because I know what you're doing with the Riverdale Heights development. Her heart sank. Jerome, he held up a hand. I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to help. Latasha stared at him, uncomprehending. My sister isn't the only family I have in Riverdale, he explained. My mother lives in the senior apartments on Elm, the ones Belfort plans to demolish first. How do you know that? Because I've been watching him too. Jerome reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. I've worked for Belfort for 8 years. I know how to move around that house without being seen, and I know where he keeps his real records. Latasha took the flash drive with trembling fingers. What's on this? Everything. The real numbers behind the development, the environmental reports he buried, and recordings meetings with the mayor, the council members. Jerome's eyes were hard. He's not just bribing officials, Latasha. He's threatening them too. Why are you giving this to me? Because you have the connection to that community organizer, Jenkins. I've seen you talking to him at the center. Jerome moved toward the door. I can't be the face of this fight. My mother needs her medication, and Belfort pays for her insurance through my employment. The parallels to her own situation weren't lost on Latasha. This is a huge risk, Jerome. So is what you're doing. He paused at the door. There's something else you should know. Belfort's interest in your daughter isn't random. What do you mean? I overheard him on the phone yesterday. Something about genetic testing and compatibility. Jerome frowned. I don't understand all of it, but he mentioned Zoe by name, and something about her being a perfect match. A chill ran down Latasha's spine. A match for what? I don't know. But be careful, Latasha. This isn't just about real estate anymore. After Jerome left, Latasha sat at her small kitchen table, the flash drive heavy in her palm. What had he meant about genetic testing? Why would Belfort be interested in Zoe's genetics? She glanced at the pile of medical bills on the counter. Zoe's asthma medication had always been expensive, but the recent price hike had been extreme. And now that she thought about it, the new prescription had come from a specialist. Latasha had never chosen one recommended by the school nurse after Zoe's last major attack. A specialist from Greenfield Medical Center, owned by Belfort Enterprises. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Somehow, Belfort had access to Zoe's medical information. But why? What possible interest could a billionaire have in a 7-year-old girl from Riverdale Heights? Latasha's hands shook as she plugged the flash drive into her laptop. File after file appeared: documents, spreadsheets, audio recordings. It would take hours to go through it all. She clicked on a folder labeled Personal and froze. Inside was a single document titled Callahan Medical History. Callahan. William Belfort's wife's maiden name was Callahan. With growing dread, Latasha opened the file. Medical records filled the screen not for Clarissa Belfort, but for a child. Charlotte Belfort, age 9. The diagnosis leapt off the page. Chronic respiratory failure, terminal, requiring lung transplant. And below it, a handwritten note. Potential donor match, identified. Hawkins, Zoe. Age 7. Genetic compatibility, 98.7%. Latasha's world tilted on its axis. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be real. But as she scrolled through more files, the horrifying truth emerged. The Belforts had a daughter, one kept out of the public eye due to her illness. And somehow, they had discovered that Zoe was a near-perfect match for organ donation. The Riverdale Heights development wasn't just about profit. It was about clearing away obstacles, creating a situation where a desperate mother might be willing to consider options she would otherwise never contemplate. Latasha closed the laptop, bile rising in her throat. She rushed to Zoe's bedroom, needing to see her daughter, to confirm she was safe. Zoe slept peacefully, her chest rising and falling in the gentle rhythm that Latasha had watched countless nights. The inhaler sat on the bedside table, the new prescription from Greenfield Medical Center. With shaking hands, Latasha picked it up and examined it closely for the first time. The label looked normal, but something about the medication itself had always bothered her. Zoe's symptoms had actually worsened since starting it. A terrible suspicion formed in her mind. What if the medication wasn't helping Zoe? What if it was deliberately making her condition worse, creating a medical justification for more invasive procedures? The thought was too monstrous to contemplate, but the evidence was mounting. Belfort's interest in Zoe's health, the specialist from his medical center, the genetic testing she'd never authorized. Latasha sank to the floor beside Zoe's bed, her mind reeling. This was no longer just about saving their home. It was about saving her daughter from a nightmare beyond imagination. Tomorrow was the dinner with the mayor, her last chance to gather evidence before Belfort's plans for Riverdale Heights were finalized. But now, with Jerome's flash drive and this new, terrifying information, everything had changed. She needed to get Zoe away from here, away from Belfort's reach. But first, she needed proof. Proof that would not only stop the development but expose Belfort's true intentions. As dawn broke, Latasha made her decision. She would go to work as usual. She would serve at the mayor's dinner, and she would find the final piece of evidence she needed, no matter the risk. What she didn't know was that Belfort was already 2 steps ahead of her. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Latasha kissed a sleeping Zoe goodbye. She'd spent the night researching lung transplant protocols, horrified to discover that while living donors were rare for lungs, partial transplants were possible, especially for children. "I need a huge favor," Latasha whispered to Mrs. Patterson at her door. "Can Zoe stay with your sister in Millbrook for a few days?" The elderly woman's eyes widened. Latasha, what's happening? I can't explain everything now, but Zoe isn't safe here. Latasha pressed a small bag into Mrs. Patterson's hands. Her medication, clothes, and school things are in here. And this, she handed over the flash drive, needs to go to Marcus Jenkins at the community center. Today. Tell him to look at the folder marked personal. You're scaring me, Mrs. Patterson said, clutching the items. I'm scared too. Latasha's voice broke. But I need to end this. Please, take Zoe somewhere Belfort can't find her. What about you? Latasha straightened her uniform. I'm going to work. The atmosphere at Oakwood Manor was tense when Latasha arrived. Security had been increased, men in dark suits patrolled the grounds, and a guard checked staff bags more thoroughly than usual. Phone! The guard demanded when it was Latasha's turn. She handed it over. Grateful she'd already transferred Jerome's files to a cloud account Marcus could access. Inside, the house was a flurry of activity preparing for the mayor's dinner. Latasha moved through her duties mechanically, her mind focused on her real mission, finding concrete proof of Belfort's plans for Zoe. Around noon, she was arranging flowers in the formal dining room when she overheard Belfort in his adjacent study. The girl's medical records confirm it, he was saying to someone. 98% compatibility. It's practically miraculous. A woman's voice responded, not Clarissa's, but clinical and detached. Even with compatibility, there are ethical considerations, Mr. Belfort. Living donor transplantation requires parental consent, which we'll get, Belfort replied confidently. Once the Riverdale development proceeds, the mother will be in a vulnerable position, financially desperate. We'll approach with an offer then, generous compensation, lifetime housing, educational trust for the child. And if she refuses? There was a pause. Everyone has a price, doctor. We just need to find hers. Latasha's hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the crystal vase. They were discussing Zoe as if she were a commodity, a spare parts warehouse for their daughter. The medication adjustment is working as expected, the doctor continued. Her latest tests show increased inflammation, which will justify the specialist consultation next month. Good. By then, her mother should be much more receptive to our proposal. The eviction notices go out next week. Latasha backed away from the door, bile rising in her throat. They were deliberately worsening Zoe's condition, making her sicker to create a paper trail justifying more invasive procedures. She needed to document this conversation, but without her phone, she had no way to record it. Then, she remembered the antique clock on Belfort's desk. She'd cleaned it hundreds of times, never paying attention to the small company logo on its base. Sentinel Security. It wasn't just a clock, it was a recording device. Belfort recorded all his meetings, which meant evidence of this conversation, and possibly others, existed somewhere in the house. The dinner preparation consumed the rest of the afternoon. By 6 o'clock, Latasha was helping the catering staff set up the formal dining room. The mayor would arrive at 7, along with 2 council members and the head of the zoning board, all implicated in the bribery documents she'd already photographed. As she placed the final water glass, Belfort entered the room. He surveyed the table with critical eyes before noticing Latasha. Everything looks acceptable, he said, which from him was high praise. You'll be serving tonight, Latasha. The regular serving staff has been reassigned. Her heart sank. Serving meant she'd be in the room throughout dinner, unable to search for the recording device. Yes, sir. He studied her face. You seem tired today. I'm fine, sir. And your daughter? How is her breathing? The direct question about Zoe sent ice through Latasha's veins. She's the same, sir. Belfort nodded thoughtfully. Children's health is so precious, isn't it? So fragile. He straightened his already perfect tie. I have a daughter too, you know. The casual revelation stunned her. He'd never mentioned Charlotte publicly. I didn't know, sir. Few people do. She's been ill since birth. His expression softened momentarily, the first genuine emotion Latasha had ever seen from him. A parent would do anything for their child. Wouldn't you agree? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Latasha understood all too well now. Yes, she answered carefully. Anything legal and ethical. Something hardened in Belfort's eyes. Ethics are luxuries, Latasha. Survival doesn't always afford such niceties. Before she could respond, Mrs. Belfort swept into the room in a designer gown. William, the mayor's car just turned onto the drive. Perfect timing. He gave Latasha one last measuring look before turning away. The dinner proceeded with excruciating slowness. Latasha served each course with practiced precision, all while straining to hear the conversation. Belfort was careful, speaking in coded terms about the Riverside project and its community benefits. The mayor, a jovial man with a politician's smile, seemed fully on board. The zoning change is practically guaranteed, he assured Belfort between bites of poached salmon. Though that community group is making noise. Nothing to worry about, Belfort replied smoothly. Their concerns will be addressed with appropriate compensation. By dessert, Latasha's nerves were frayed to breaking point. She'd learned nothing new, and her opportunity to search for evidence was slipping away. Then fate intervened. As she served coffee, Councilman Parker, already on his fourth glass of wine, gestured too emphatically and sent his cup flying. Hot coffee splashed across Mrs. Belfort's silk gown. Clarissa shrieked, jumping to her feet. "My Valentino! It's ruined!" "I'm so sorry," the councilman stammered. "Please, let me—" "Don't touch me," Clarissa snapped. "Latasha, come with me, now." It was the break Latasha needed. As she followed Clarissa upstairs to help her change, she calculated quickly. Belfort's study was on the way to the master suite. If she could slip away for just a moment. "Hurry up," Clarissa called, already halfway up the grand staircase. "Coming, ma'am. Let me grab the stain remover from the supply closet first." The supply closet was adjacent to Belfort's study. As Clarissa continued upstairs, Latasha ducked into the closet, grabbed a bottle of stain remover, then slipped into the study. The room was dark, illuminated only by the security monitors on one wall. Latasha moved quickly to the desk, locating the clock. She turned it over, searching for a way to access the recordings. There, a small SD card slot on the bottom. With trembling fingers, she ejected the tiny card and slipped it into her pocket. Then, on impulse, she opened the desk drawer where she'd previously found the Riverdale documents. The folder was gone, replaced by a different one labeled Hawkins. Her own name. Heart pounding, she opened it. Inside were photos, surveillance photos of her and Zoe, their apartment building, Zoe's school, medical records, and most chillingly, a document titled Acquisition Strategy. She scanned it quickly, horror mounting with each line. It outlined a detailed plan to isolate Latasha financially and emotionally, creating a situation where she would be receptive to medical intervention proposals regarding her daughter. The final page contained a handwritten note. Approach scheduled for Friday. Offer. 2M compensation plus housing plus education. Non-negotiable. Friday. 2 days from now. They were planning to approach her with an offer for Zoe's lungs. Latasha quickly photographed the documents with the small disposable camera she'd hidden in her uniform pocket that morning, a precaution against having her phone confiscated. She was replacing the folder when a voice froze her in place. "I wondered how long it would take you to find that." William Belfort stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Latasha straightened, the SD card a damning weight in her pocket. "Mr. Belfort, I was just getting stain remover for Mrs. Belfort." "In my desk drawer?" He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I'm not a fool, Latasha." She backed away as he approached, her mind racing for an escape. "Your wife is waiting for me." "My wife can wait." He gestured to the folder on the desk. "You've read it, I assume?" There was no point denying it. "You're planning to buy my daughter's lungs for your child." Saying it aloud made the monstrous reality even more horrifying. To her surprise, Belfort didn't deny it. "Charlotte is dying. The transplant list is years long. She doesn't have years." "So you decided to target my daughter? Make her sicker with that medication from your clinic? Destroy our home to make me desperate enough to consider your offer?" Latasha's voice shook with rage. "It's not personal," Belfort said, though his eyes betrayed him. "Zoe's compatibility is extraordinarily rare. When the genetic screening from her school physical came back, it was like finding a miracle. A school physical I never authorized genetic testing for. Details." He waved dismissively. I'm prepared to make you wealthy, Latasha. $2 million. A new home. The best education for Zoe. In exchange for cutting pieces from my daughter's lungs. Latasha felt sick. She's 7 years old, and Charlotte is 9. She's been on oxygen since she was 3. For the first time, real emotion cracked through Belfort's polished veneer. Do you know what it's like to watch your child struggle for every breath? To know she'll die unless you find a way to save her? I know exactly what that's like, Latasha shot back. Zoe has had asthma since she was a toddler. The difference is, I didn't try to sacrifice someone else's child to save her. Belfort's expression hardened. You're being emotional. This is a business transaction. Both our daughters benefit. By risking Zoe's life in an unnecessary surgery? By taking her away from school for months of recovery? By leaving her with lifelong complications? Latasha shook her head in disbelief. There's nothing you could offer that would make me agree to this. Everyone has a price, Latasha. Not for my daughter's body parts. They stared at each other across the desk. Employer and employee, billionaire and housekeeper, parent and parent. What if it were reversed? Belfort asked quietly. If Zoe were dying and Charlotte could save her, wouldn't you do anything? The question hit Latasha like a physical blow. For a moment, just a moment, she glimpsed the desperate father behind the ruthless businessman. I would do anything legal and ethical, she repeated her earlier words. I would wait on the transplant list. I would search for willing adult donors. I would not manipulate, threaten, or endanger another child. Something shifted in Belfort's eyes, not softening. Exactly, but recognition. You've taken something from my desk. The SD card. Latasha tensed, ready to run. That card contains evidence that could destroy me, he continued calmly. Conversations about bribes. About your daughter. About Charlotte. I know, and yet you still came to work today. Why? The question caught her off guard. Because I needed proof. To stop you from destroying my neighborhood and to protect my daughter. Belfort studied her for a long moment. Where is Zoe now? Alarm shot through her. Safe. Away from you. He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. The mayor is waiting downstairs. The zoning change will be approved tomorrow. Riverdale Heights will be demolished within 6 months. Not if these recordings become public, Latasha countered, her hand moving to her pocket. True. Belfort circled the desk, moving closer. So we appear to be at an impasse. Latasha backed toward the door. I should get back to Mrs. Belfort. My wife knows you're not coming. Belfort's voice stopped her cold. She's the one who suggested I check my study when you disappeared. Fear coursed through her. She was trapped. What happens now? She asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Belfort's answer was interrupted by a commotion downstairs, raised voices, heavy footsteps. Sir. The security chief appeared at the door, breathless. There's a situation. Police are here with reporters. Something about corruption allegations and the Riverdale development. Belfort's face drained of color. What? How? Someone leaked documents to the press. They're demanding a statement. Latasha's mind raced. Marcus. He must have received the flash drive and acted immediately. Belfort turned to her, his expression thunderous. What did you do? Before she could answer, more voices joined the commotion. One stood out clearly, Clarissa Belfort, her voice shrill with panic. William, they know about Charlotte. They're asking questions about Greenfield medical and experimental treatments. For the first time since she'd known him, William Belfort looked genuinely afraid. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. In that moment of distraction, Latasha made her move. She darted past him and the security chief, racing down the hallway toward the back stairs. Stop her! Belfort shouted behind her. But Latasha knew Oakwood Manor better than anyone. Every corridor, every hidden passage, every service entrance. She'd cleaned them all for 3 years. She flew down the back stairs and through the kitchen, startling the catering staff. Behind her, she could hear security giving chase. The service entrance was just ahead, and beyond it, freedom. She burst through the door into the cool evening air, ready to run for the gate. Instead, she collided with a solid figure in a police uniform. Whoa there, the officer said, steadying her. Are you Latasha Hawkins? She nodded, breathless with fear. "Marcus Jenkins sent us. Said you might need assistance leaving the premises." Relief washed over her like a physical wave. "Yes, please. I have evidence." She patted her pocket with the SD card and camera. The officer nodded, then looked past her as Belfort's security team emerged from the house. "Ms. Hawkins is leaving with us," he announced firmly. "Any objections?" The security men hesitated, looking to their earpieces for instructions. In that moment of uncertainty, a black SUV pulled up to the service entrance. The back door opened, and Marcus leaned out. "Latasha! Come on!" With the officer providing cover, Latasha ran to the vehicle and climbed in. As they pulled away from Oakwood Manor, she finally allowed herself to breathe. "Zoe?" she asked immediately. "Safe with Mrs. Patterson's sister," Marcus assured her. "I sent my cousin to drive them to Millbrook as soon as I got your message." Latasha slumped against the seat, the adrenaline draining from her body. "The flash drive was a gold mine," Marcus finished. "We took it straight to District Attorney Ramirez. She issued warrants within the hour." Through the rear window, Latasha could see police cars converging on Oakwood Manor, lights flashing in the gathering dusk. "What about Charlotte?" she asked quietly. "Belfort's daughter?" Marcus gave her a curious look. "The girl with the lung condition? The DA is already looking into Greenfield Medical's practices. Apparently, they've been conducting unauthorized genetic testing on children throughout the district." Latasha closed her eyes, the full weight of what she'd uncovered finally hitting her. "They were going to take parts of Zoe's lungs, Marcus. They made her sicker on purpose to justify the procedures." Marcus's expression hardened. "That's not happening. Not to Zoe, not to any child." As they drove away from Oakwood Manor, Latasha felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. The evidence was out. Belfort's schemes were exposed. Riverdale Heights might be saved. But she knew this wasn't over. William Belfort was powerful, connected, and desperate to save his daughter. He wouldn't go down without a fight. And somewhere in the chaos behind them, a 9-year-old girl still struggled to breathe, caught in the web of her father's ruthless ambition. Have you ever wondered how far you'd go to protect someone you love, and where you'd draw the line between compassion and justice? The next 48 hours passed in a blur of police statements, media interviews, and tearful reunions with Zoe. The story had exploded across national news. Billionaire CEO attempted to harvest child's organs through forced evictions. Latasha sat in District Attorney Ramirez's office. The evidence spread across the desk between them. The SD card recordings, the surveillance photos, the medical records, and Jerome's flash drive. "This is the most disturbing case I've seen in 20 years of prosecution," Ramirez said, removing her glasses to rub tired eyes. "The scope of it: bribing officials, unauthorized medical testing on children, deliberately administering medication to worsen a child's condition." "Will it be enough?" Latasha asked, the question that had kept her awake for 2 nights. Ramirez nodded grimly. "For multiple felony charges. The recordings are particularly damning. Belfort discussing bribes in his own voice, the doctor admitting to manipulating Zoe's medication." "What about the Riverdale development?" "The zoning board has already suspended the approval process pending investigation. Your neighborhood is safe for now." Relief washed over Latasha, but it was tempered by lingering fear. "And Zoe? Is she safe?" "We've issued a restraining order against both Belforts and anyone associated with Greenfield Medical. Your daughter's school has been notified." And Ramirez slid a business card across the desk. "This is the contact information for Dr. Elaine Chen at Children's Hospital. She's reviewed Zoe's medical records and wants to see her immediately to assess any damage from the manipulated medications." Latasha took the card with trembling fingers. "Thank you." "There's something else you should know," Ramirez said, her expression softening slightly. "Charlotte Belfort was admitted to Mercy Hospital last night. Her condition has deteriorated." Despite everything, Latasha felt a pang of sympathy for the child. "She's innocent in all this." "Yes, she is." Ramirez gathered the documents into a folder. "The arraignment is tomorrow morning. Belfort's lawyers are already pushing for bail, but with flight risk and the severity of the charges, I'm confident the judge will deny it." As Latasha left the DA's office, her phone rang an unknown number. "Ms. Hawkins?" The voice was female, cultured, with a slight tremor. This is Clarissa Belfort. Latasha nearly dropped the phone. How did you get this number? That's hardly important. Clarissa's voice hardened. What is important is that we need to talk, in person, about Charlotte. I have nothing to say to you, Latasha replied, quickening her pace toward the parking lot where Marcus waited. My daughter is dying, Miss Hawkins. The raw pain in Clarissa's voice stopped Latasha cold. The doctors give her days, maybe a week. I'm not asking for what William wanted. I need to talk to you. Mother to mother. Against every instinct, Latasha found herself asking, where? St. Mark's Cathedral. The side chapel. 1 hour. Clarissa paused. Come alone, please. This isn't a trap. I swear on Charlotte's life. The line went dead. Marcus was furious when Latasha told him about the call. It's obviously a setup. The Belforts are desperate. They're facing prison, financial ruin, public disgrace. They'll do anything to silence you before the arraignment. I know, Latasha agreed. But I'm not going alone. You'll be with me, and we'll notify D.A. Ramirez. Why go at all? Latasha thought of Charlotte, a child the same age as Zoe, fighting for every breath. Because a little girl is dying, and her mother asked to speak with me. I need to know what she wants. St. Mark's Cathedral was nearly empty when they arrived. Ramirez had stationed plainclothes officers outside, while Marcus accompanied Latasha into the cavernous space. I'll be right outside the chapel door, he promised. One shout, and I'm in there. Latasha nodded, then pushed open the heavy wooden door to the side chapel. Clarissa Belfort knelt in the front pew, her designer clothes replaced by simple black pants and a sweater. Without her usual perfect makeup and styled hair, she looked older, exhausted, and utterly heartbroken. She turned at the sound of the door, rising unsteadily. You came. What do you want, Mrs. Belfort? Latasha remained by the door, wary. Clarissa gestured to the pew beside her. Please, sit with me. After a moment's hesitation, Latasha moved forward and sat, leaving space between them. First, I want to apologize, Clarissa began, her voice barely above a whisper. Not for William, he'll have to answer for his own actions, but for my part in it. For knowing what was happening to your daughter, and doing nothing to stop it. The admission stunned Latasha. You knew about the medication? About the plans for Zoe's lungs? Clarissa nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I told myself it was justified, that Charlotte's life was worth any price. She looked down at her clasped hands. It's amazing what you can rationalize when your child is dying. Why are you telling me this now? Because I need you to understand something. Clarissa reached into her purse and withdrew a manila envelope. Charlotte doesn't know what her father did, what I allowed. She's just a little girl who can't understand why she can't breathe like other children. She handed the envelope to Latasha, who opened it cautiously. Inside was a single photograph of a thin girl with Belfort's blue eyes and Clarissa's delicate features, sitting in a hospital bed surrounded by medical equipment. Despite the oxygen tubes and monitors, she was smiling, holding a stuffed giraffe. That's my daughter, Clarissa said softly. The doctors say her lungs will fail completely within days. There's nothing more they can do. Latasha studied the photo, her heart aching despite everything. I'm sorry for Charlotte, truly. But I don't understand what you want from me. I want you to know that I've instructed our lawyers not to contest any of the charges against William. I've provided additional evidence of his dealings not just with Riverdale Heights, but other communities he's destroyed over the years. Latasha looked up in surprise. You're testifying against your husband? I'm ensuring justice is served, Clarissa corrected. What he did, what we did to your daughter was unforgivable. No child should suffer for another's benefit, even to save Charlotte? Clarissa's face crumpled. Especially not for that. What kind of lesson would that teach her? That her life matters more than others? That wealth entitles us to take what isn't ours? She shook her head. I've failed as a mother in many ways, but I won't fail in this. Charlotte will know right from wrong, even if she doesn't live long enough to practice it. The raw honesty left Latasha speechless. This was not the cold, dismissive woman she'd served for 3 years. There's something else, Clarissa continued, pulling another document from her purse. William doesn't know about this. I've established a trust for the families of Riverdale Heights, $300 million, to either renovate the existing neighborhood or relocate residents to equivalent or better housing, according to their choice. Latasha stared at the legal document, unable to process what she was seeing. Why? Penance, perhaps, or just basic human decency finally finding its way to the surface. Clarissa's smile was sad. The trust is irrevocable. Even if William somehow avoids prison, he can't touch this money. It's already in the hands of an independent board, with Mr. Jenkins named as community representative. Marcus, you've spoken to him. Yesterday, he was, understandably skeptical. But the money has already been transferred. Clarissa hesitated. There's a separate trust for Zoe. For her education, medical care, whatever she needs. Also irrevocable, also beyond William's reach. Latasha shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't understand. Yesterday you were ready to let your husband harvest my daughter's lungs. Today you're giving away your fortune and testifying against him? Yesterday, I was still lying to myself about who we've become. Clarissa looked toward the altar, where candles flickered in the dim light. Last night, Charlotte asked me why God was letting her die when other children get to live. I had no answer for her, but then she said something I'll never forget. Maybe he needs me in heaven to help with something important. Tears spilled down Clarissa's cheeks. My 9-year-old daughter, facing death with more grace and wisdom than I've shown in my entire privileged life. Despite everything the Belforts had done, Latasha found herself reaching out to touch Clarissa's hand. I am truly sorry about Charlotte. I know. Clarissa wiped her tears. There's one more thing. A request, not a demand. You have every right to refuse. What is it? Charlotte would like to meet Zoe. Just once. Before. She couldn't finish the sentence. Latasha withdrew her hand, alarm bells ringing. Absolutely not. After everything that's happened, I understand, Clarissa said quickly. It was Charlotte's idea. She saw Zoe's picture in her father's study and thought she looked kind. She doesn't know anything about the transplant plans or Riverdale Heights. She doesn't have friends. Other children are afraid of all her medical equipment. The request was impossible, unthinkable. And yet, Latasha found herself thinking of the little girl in the photograph, smiling despite the tubes and monitors. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's all I can promise. Clarissa nodded, relief evident in her expression. Thank you for even considering it. She stood, smoothing her simple black pants. The arraignment is tomorrow. I'll be there, testifying for the prosecution. As Clarissa moved toward the door, Latasha called after her. Why did you really come to faith now, after all these years of watching your husband destroy communities for profit? Clarissa paused, her hand on the heavy wooden door. I didn't come to faith. I came to accountability. She turned, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. For too long, I told myself I was just protecting my daughter. But the truth is, I was protecting my lifestyle, my social position, my comfort. It took seeing my husband willing to sacrifice another child, seeing you willing to sacrifice everything to protect your daughter, to make me realize what true maternal love looks like. With that, she was gone, leaving Latasha alone in the quiet chapel with a photograph, legal documents worth hundreds of millions, and an impossible decision. Outside, Marcus was waiting anxiously. What happened? What did she want? Latasha handed him the trust documents. To make amends, apparently. As Marcus scanned the papers, his eyes widening, Latasha's phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Clarissa again. The message contained only an address and a time. Mercy Hospital, 4 p.m. She wants me to bring Zoe to meet Charlotte, Latasha explained, showing Marcus the earlier request. That's not happening, he said immediately. It's too risky. I know. Latasha stared at the message, conflicted. But what if it's genuine? What if a dying child just wants to meet another child before she goes? After everything the Belforts have done, you're considering this? Latasha thought of Charlotte's smile in the photograph, of Zoe's compassionate heart, of the lessons she wanted her daughter to learn about forgiveness and empathy. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me thinks it's crazy, but another part. Marcus sighed, recognizing the look on her face. If, and that's a big if you decide to do this, you won't go alone. I'll come with you, and we'll have the DA post officers. I need to talk to Zoe first, Latasha said. It has to be her choice. That afternoon, Latasha sat with Zoe in their small living room, trying to explain the situation in terms a 7-year-old cold understand. There's a little girl in the hospital who's very sick, she began. Her name is Charlotte, and she has trouble breathing, like you sometimes do with your asthma, but much worse. Zoe nodded solemnly. Does she have an inhaler like me? No, honey. Her lungs don't work properly at all. She needs special machines to help her breathe. That's sad, Zoe said, her eyes wide with empathy. Is she going to get better? Latasha hesitated. No, sweetheart. The doctors say she doesn't have much time left. You mean she's going to die? Zoe's direct question caught Latasha off guard. Yes, baby. She is. Zoe was quiet for a moment, processing this. Is she scared? I think she probably is. Her mom says she doesn't have many friends because she's in the hospital so much. That's really sad. Zoe looked up at her mother. Is that why you look so worried? Because of the sick girl? Latasha marveled at her daughter's perceptiveness. Partly. Charlotte's mom asked if you might want to meet Charlotte, just to say hello and maybe play a little, if she's feeling up to it. Like a play date at the hospital? Something like that. But I need you to know something important. Latasha took Zoe's small hands in hers. Charlotte's dad is the man who was going to make us move away from our home. He did some bad things, and that's why I've been so worried lately. Zoe's brow furrowed. Is Charlotte bad too? No, honey. Charlotte hasn't done anything wrong. She's just a little girl who's very sick. Then why can't I meet her? It's not her fault her dad is mean. The simple wisdom of children. Latasha pulled Zoe into a hug, overwhelmed by her daughter's instinctive compassion. You're right, baby. It's not her fault. She pulled back to look into Zoe's eyes. But I need to be sure you understand this is completely your choice. If you don't want to go, that's absolutely okay. Zoe thought for a moment, then nodded decisively. I want to meet her. Maybe I can show her my inhaler tricks and make her laugh. Latasha's eyes filled with tears. You are the most amazing person I know, Zoe Hawkins. Can we bring her a present? When I was in the hospital for my asthma, you brought me Mr. Whiskers. She held up her well-loved stuffed cat. That's a wonderful idea. And so, at precisely 4 p.m., Latasha and Zoe walked into Mercy Hospital, accompanied by Marcus and 2 plainclothes officers arranged by D.A. Ramirez. They carried a small gift bag containing a stuffed giraffe Zoe's choice after seeing Charlotte's favorite animal in the photograph. The pediatric ICU was quiet, the hushed atmosphere broken only by the beeping of monitors and the soft conversations of medical staff. Clarissa met them at the nurse's station, her eyes red-rimmed but grateful. Thank you for coming, she said softly. Charlotte's having a good day today, the doctors say. She trailed off, unable to finish. We brought a present, Zoe announced, holding up the gift bag. It's a giraffe like hers, but this one is purple. Clarissa knelt to Zoe's level, her composure cracking slightly. That's very kind of you. Charlotte loves purple. She led them to a private room at the end of the hall. Through the glass window, Latasha could see the little girl from the photograph, propped up in bed, surrounded by medical equipment. Despite her obvious frailty, she was alert, watching a nature documentary on the television mounted on the wall. Charlotte? Clarissa entered first. The visitors I told you about are here. Charlotte turned, her face lighting up with a smile that transformed her thin features. Hi. Her voice was weak but enthusiastic. Zoe stepped forward without hesitation. Hi, I'm Zoe. I brought you something. She held out the gift bag. As the 2 children began to talk, Zoe chattering away, Charlotte responding with quiet delight, Latasha found herself standing beside Clarissa, united for a moment in the simple joy of watching their daughters connect. Thank you for this, Clarissa whispered. It means more than you can know. Latasha nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. In Charlotte's smile, in Zoe's kindness, she saw something transcendent, something that rose above the ugliness and greed that had brought them to this point. The visit lasted an hour. Zoe showed Charlotte her inhaler tricks, making the older girl laugh. They watched part of the nature documentary together, exclaiming over baby elephants. Charlotte shared her extensive collection of stuffed animals, each with its own name and backstory. As they prepared to leave, Charlotte reached for Zoe's hand. "Will you come back tomorrow? I can show you my favorite book." Zoe looked to Latasha, who nodded. "We'd like that," Latasha said, surprising herself with the sincerity of her response. In the hallway, Clarissa touched Latasha's arm. "The arraignment is at 9 tomorrow. I'll be there to testify against William. Are you sure? Charlotte needs you here?" "Justice needs me there," Clarissa replied firmly. "My daughter deserves to see that her mother finally stood for what's right, even at the end." As they left the hospital, Latasha felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. Tomorrow would bring William Belfort's arraignment, the formal beginning of justice for what he'd done. But today had brought something unexpected, a moment of grace in the midst of tragedy. "Mom?" Zoe asked as they walked to the car. "Is Charlotte going to heaven soon?" Latasha squeezed her daughter's hand. "I think she might be, baby." "Then I'm glad we're her friends now. Nobody should have to go to heaven without having friends to remember them." Out of the mouths of babes, Latasha thought, tears pricking her eyes. Out of the mouths of babes. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and protesters when Latasha arrived the next morning. Signs denouncing Belfort Enterprises and supporting Riverdale Heights bobbed above the crowd. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching skyward. "Ready for this?" Marcus asked as they approached the imposing building. Latasha nodded, squaring her shoulders. "More than ready." Inside, the courtroom was already packed. D.A. Ramirez waved them to seats behind the prosecution table. Across the aisle, a team of expensive-looking lawyers conferred in hushed tones. "Where's Belfort?" Latasha whispered. "Being brought in separately," Ramirez explained. "High-profile defendants usually enter through a secure entrance." A side door opened, and William Belfort appeared, flanked by court officers. Gone was the impeccable businessman in designer suits. This Belfort wore a standard-issue orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without his trappings of wealth and power. His eyes scanned the courtroom, landing on Latasha. For a moment, their gazes locked employer and employee, predator and prey, parent and parent. Then, surprisingly, he gave a small nod of acknowledgement before taking his seat. The proceedings began with formal charges: conspiracy, bribery of public officials, fraud, practicing medicine without a license, child endangerment, and attempted organ trafficking. As each charge was read, murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "How does the defendant plead?" the judge asked. Belfort's lead attorney stood. "Your Honor, before entering a plea, we request a brief recess to confer with our client. We've received new information that may impact these proceedings." The judge frowned. "This is highly irregular, Counselor. The arraignment was scheduled with ample time for preparation." "I understand, Your Honor, but this information only came to light this morning. It concerns Mr. Belfort's daughter, Charlotte." At the mention of Charlotte, Latasha tensed. What new manipulation was this? The judge sighed. 20 minutes, Counselor, not a minute more." As the court recessed, Ramirez turned to Latasha with concern. "This could be a delay tactic. Belfort's team might be planning something." "Like what?" Latasha asked. "A plea deal, possibly. Or they might try to use Charlotte's condition for sympathy." Before Latasha could respond, a court officer approached. "Ms. Hawkins? Mr. Belfort has requested to speak with you privately before proceedings resume." "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately. "It's your decision," the officer added. But he was quite insistent, said it concerns both your daughters. Latasha exchanged glances with Ramirez. "Would I be alone with him?" "No, ma'am. I'd be present, along with his attorney, and you can bring your counsel as well." After a moment's consideration, Latasha nodded. "I'll hear what he has to say." Despite Marcus's protests, Latasha followed the officer to a small conference room. William Belfort sat at the table, his handcuffed wrists resting before him. His attorney stood nearby, along with D.A. Ramirez, who had insisted on accompanying Latasha. Thank you for coming, Belfort said, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. What do you want? Latasha remained standing, arms crossed. I received a call from the hospital this morning. Belfort's composure cracked slightly. Charlotte had a severe respiratory crisis overnight. The doctors don't think she'll last the day. Despite everything, Latasha felt a pang of genuine sympathy. I'm sorry to hear that. Clarissa told me about your visit yesterday. About Zoe. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. My daughter has never had a real friend before. She talked about Zoe until she fell asleep last night. Latasha waited, unsure where this was heading. I've instructed my attorneys to enter a guilty plea to all charges, Belfort continued, shocking everyone in the room. No deals, no reduced sentences, full admission of guilt. His attorney shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. Why? Latasha asked, suspicious of this sudden capitulation. Because I want to see my daughter before she dies. Belfort's voice broke. The court might grant compassionate leave for a few hours if I don't drag this out. And because... He took a deep breath. Because what I did was wrong. Monumentally, unforgivably wrong. The admission hung in the air between them. I told myself I was just being a good father, he continued. That Charlotte's life was worth any price. But last night, Clarissa told me how Zoe brought Charlotte a gift, how they laughed together, how your daughter showed kindness to mine, despite everything I'd done to your family. He looked down at his cuffed hands. I've spent my life believing that power and money could solve any problem. That rules were for people who lacked the resources to circumvent them. That my daughter's life was inherently more valuable because of who I am. And now? Latasha prompted when he fell silent. Now I understand that I became the very monster I've always claimed to be protecting Charlotte from. He met Latasha's gaze directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. What I did to Zoe, the medication, the surveillance, the plans for her lungs, it's unforgivable. I'm just asking that you know I recognize the full weight of my crimes. Latasha studied him, searching for deception and finding none. What do you want from me, Mr. Belfort? Nothing. You've already given Charlotte more than I could have hoped for a friend in her final hours. He hesitated. Though, if Zoe wanted to say goodbye, but I understand if that's asking too much. The request was eerily similar to Clarissa's in the chapel. Latasha considered it carefully. I'll talk to Zoe, she said finally. It will be her decision. Relief washed over Belfort's face. Thank you. As they prepared to return to the courtroom, Belfort spoke again. One more thing, Latasha. The trust Clarissa established for Riverdale Heights, it wasn't just her idea. We discussed it the night after Charlotte met Zoe. It's the least we could do to begin making amends. When court resumed, William Belfort stood before the judge and pleaded guilty to all charges. The courtroom erupted in surprised murmurs. Order, the judge commanded, banging his gavel. Mr. Belfort, you understand that by pleading guilty to these serious charges, you face substantial prison time? I do, Your Honor. And you're entering this plea freely and voluntarily, without coercion. Yes, Your Honor. The judge studied him for a moment. Very well. I accept your guilty plea. Sentencing will be scheduled for 4 weeks from today. He paused. I understand there's a motion for temporary compassionate release? Belfort's attorney stepped forward. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Belfort's 9-year-old daughter is in terminal condition at Mercy Hospital. Doctors believe she has hours, perhaps a day at most. We request Mr. Belfort be permitted to visit her under guard. The judge considered this. Ms. Ramirez? The prosecution's position? Ramirez stood. Given the defendant's guilty plea and the circumstances, the prosecution does not object, provided appropriate security measures are in place. So ordered, the judge declared. The defendant will be permitted 4 hours at Mercy Hospital, under guard, after which he will return to custody to await sentencing. As the court adjourned, Latasha found herself face to face with Belfort one last time as officers prepared to escort him out. Thank you, he said simply. I didn't do it for you, she replied. I did it for Charlotte, and for Zoe, who taught me that compassion doesn't mean condoning wrongs. It means recognizing our shared humanity despite them. Belfort nodded, understanding in his eyes. You're a better parent than I ever was. I hope someday to be worthy of Charlotte's love, the way you're worthy of Zoe's." With that, he was led away, leaving Latasha standing in the emptying courtroom, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Outside, reporters swarmed, shouting questions about Belfort's unexpected guilty plea. Marcus helped Latasha navigate through the crowd to where a car waited to take them to the hospital. Zoe was already there with Mrs. Patterson, having decided immediately that she wanted to see Charlotte again. "Is she really going to heaven today?" Zoe had asked that morning. "The doctors think so, baby." "Then I definitely need to go." Friends say goodbye to each other. Now, as they entered Charlotte's hospital room, Latasha was struck by how much the girl's condition had deteriorated overnight. Her skin had a bluish tinge, and her breathing was labored despite the oxygen mask covering her face. Clarissa sat beside the bed, holding her daughter's hand. She looked up as they entered, gratitude and grief mingling in her expression. "She's been asking for Zoe," she said softly. "The doctors have increased her pain medication, so she drifts in and out." Zoe approached the bed without hesitation, climbing carefully onto the chair Clarissa vacated for her. "Hi, Charlotte," she said, taking the sick girl's hand. "I came back like I promised." Charlotte's eyes fluttered open, recognition dawning slowly. "Zoe," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the mask. "You came." "Of course I did. We're friends." Charlotte smiled weakly. "Will you tell me a story? About elephants?" And so Zoe began to spin a tale about baby elephants having adventures in the jungle, her voice clear and confident in the quiet room. Charlotte listened, her eyes fixed on Zoe's animated face, occasionally squeezing her hand when something in the story delighted her. Latasha and Clarissa stood together by the window, united in maternal love and the bittersweet beauty of the moment unfolding before them. "William is coming," Clarissa said quietly. "The court granted temporary release." Latasha nodded. "I know. I was there." "He pleaded guilty to everything?" "Yes. No deals, no reduced charges." Clarissa closed her eyes briefly. "Good. It won't bring Charlotte back, but perhaps it will help other families avoid what we put yours through." A commotion in the hallway signaled William Belfort's arrival. He entered the room, flanked by two officers, still in his orange jumpsuit, but with his handcuffs removed. His eyes went immediately to Charlotte, and the mask of controlled composure he'd maintained, even in court, crumbled completely. "Daddy?" Charlotte's voice was faint but joyful. "You came too." Belfort moved to his daughter's bedside, dropping to his knees. "Of course I came, Princess. Wild horses couldn't keep me away." As father and daughter reunited, Latasha gently suggested to Zoe that they step outside to give the family privacy. "But I was telling Charlotte about the elephants," Zoe protested. "You can finish the story in a little while," Latasha promised. "Let's give Charlotte some time with her mom and dad first." In the hallway, Zoe looked up at her mother with solemn eyes. "Charlotte's really going to heaven today, isn't she?" Latasha knelt to her daughter's level. "I think she is, baby. I'm sad, but I'm also happy I got to be her friend, even if it was just for a little while." Latasha pulled Zoe into a tight hug, marveling at her daughter's wisdom and compassion. "You are the most amazing person I know, Zoe Hawkins. Don't ever change." They waited in the family lounge, giving the Belforts their private time with Charlotte. About an hour later, Clarissa appeared in the doorway, her face tear-streaked but composed. "Charlotte is asking for Zoe again," she said softly. "She wants to hear the end of the elephant story." When they returned to the room, Charlotte looked even more fragile, but she smiled when she saw Zoe. William Belfort stood at the window, his back to the room, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Zoe climbed back onto the chair and took Charlotte's hand. "Where was I in the story?" "The baby elephant found a friend," Charlotte whispered. "Right. So the baby elephant and her new giraffe friend decided to have a picnic by the waterfall." Zoe continued her story, unaware of the profound impact her simple kindness was having on everyone in the room. Charlotte's breathing grew more labored, but her eyes remained fixed on Zoe's face, a small smile visible beneath her oxygen mask. As the story reached its happy ending, Charlotte's grip on Zoe's hand weakened. "Thank you," she whispered. "Best friend ever." Those were her last words. 20 minutes later, surrounded by her parents, her new friend, and a circle of love that transcended the boundaries of class, wealth, and circumstance. Charlotte Belfort took her final breath. The room fell silent except for the sudden harsh tone of the heart monitor flatlined. Clarissa's quiet sobs broke the stillness, followed by Belfort's anguished cry as he gathered his daughter's small body in his arms. Latasha gently led Zoe from the room, giving the grieving parents their privacy. In the hallway, Zoe looked up with tears streaming down her face. "Did I help, Mommy? Did I make it easier for her to go to heaven?" Latasha knelt, gathering her daughter close. "Yes, baby. You gave her the greatest gift possible, friendship and kindness when she needed it most." The officers waited respectfully outside Charlotte's room, allowing William Belfort these final moments with his daughter before returning him to custody. When he emerged an hour later, he was a broken man, all traces of the arrogant, powerful CEO erased by grief. As the officers prepared to escort him away, he paused before Latasha and Zoe. "Thank you," he said, his voice raw. "Charlotte told me you were her first real friend, Zoe. That meant everything to her." Zoe, still tearful but composed, looked up at the man who had once threatened her home and health. "She was my friend too. I'm sorry she had to go to heaven." Belfort knelt to Zoe's level, mindful of the officers watching closely. "Charlotte told me something before she—" He swallowed hard. "She said that when she gets to heaven, she's going to ask God to make sure you never have trouble breathing again." Fresh tears spilled down Zoe's cheeks. "Really? Really?" Belfort stood, addressing Latasha. "The trust for Riverdale Heights is irrevocable. So is Zoe's educational fund. It's not atonement, nothing could be, but perhaps it's a start." With that, he allowed the officers to lead him away, back to the justice that awaited him. 6 months later, Latasha stood on the front porch of her new home in Riverdale Heights. Not a luxury condominium, but a renovated neighborhood of affordable, quality housing. The Belfort Trust had transformed the community without displacing a single resident, creating a model of ethical urban development that was being studied nationwide. Zoe raced up the steps, backpack bouncing. "Mom! Guess what? I got an A on my science project about lungs." "That's wonderful, honey." Latasha hugged her daughter, marveling at how much stronger she'd grown since switching to proper medication under Dr. Chen's care. The mysterious asthma attacks had disappeared completely once the manipulated prescriptions were stopped. "And Ms. Wilson says I can present it at the district science fair next month." Zoe's excitement was contagious. "I dedicated it to Charlotte. Is that okay?" "I think that's perfect," Latasha said softly. As Zoe bounded inside to start her homework, Latasha remained on the porch, gazing at the transformed neighborhood. The community center had been expanded, the school renovated, and a new health clinic established, all funded by the Belfort Trust, now administered by a board that included Marcus and other community leaders. William Belfort had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Clarissa had filed for divorce, but continued to manage the trust, working closely with Riverdale residents to ensure their needs were met. She had sold Oakwood Manor, donating most of the proceeds to children's health research. The last time Latasha had seen her, at the dedication of the new Riverdale Heights Community Clinic, Clarissa had seemed different, humbled, purposeful, genuinely committed to making amends. "It will never be enough," she had said quietly as they stood watching the ribbon-cutting ceremony. "But it's what Charlotte would have wanted." Latasha's phone chimed with a text from Marcus, now her boyfriend of 3 months. "Meeting finished early. Dinner tonight?" She smiled, typing back a quick "yes" before heading inside to help Zoe with homework. On the mantel in their living room stood a framed photograph of Zoe and Charlotte in the hospital, heads close together, both smiling despite the circumstances. Beside it sat a purple stuffed giraffe, a reminder of a friendship that had lasted only days but had changed everything. Sometimes, Latasha reflected, the most profound transformations come from the most unexpected sources. A billionaire's greed had threatened to destroy her world, but a child's compassion had ultimately saved it, and in the process, taught everyone involved the true meaning of humanity. As she helped Zoe with her science project about lungs, the very organs that had been at the center of this entire ordeal, Latasha felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. "Mom?" Zoe asked, looking up from her textbook. "Do you think Charlotte can see us from heaven?" Latasha smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "I think she can, baby. And I think she's very proud of you." "I'm proud of you too, Mom," Zoe said with the simple directness of children. "You saved our whole neighborhood, and you weren't even scared of Mr. Belfort." Latasha laughed softly. "Oh, I was scared, believe me. But sometimes being brave isn't about not feeling fear. It's about doing what's right, even when you're terrified. Like standing up to bullies? Exactly like that." As evening settled over Riverdale Heights, the community that had nearly been lost but was now thriving, Latasha reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From humiliation in Belfort's garden to triumph in the courtroom, from fear to courage, from adversity to resilience. The path had been unexpected and painful, but it had led to this moment of peace and possibility, not just for her and Zoe, but for an entire community that now controlled its own destiny. Sometimes, Latasha thought as she watched her daughter work on her project, the most powerful person in the room isn't the one with the most money or the most impressive title. Sometimes, it's the one with the most heart. And in that department, she and Zoe were billionaires many times over. Have you ever found unexpected compassion in the midst of conflict? Or discovered that the greatest strength sometimes comes from the most vulnerable among us? 1 year later, the auditorium of Riverdale Heights Elementary School buzzed with excitement as parents, teachers, and community members filled the seats. A banner stretched across the stage. First Annual Charlotte Belfort Memorial Scholarship Awards. Latasha sat in the front row beside Marcus, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Nervous?" he whispered. "A little," she admitted. "Public speaking isn't exactly my thing." "You'll be amazing," he assured her, the diamond ring on her left hand catching the light as she adjusted her notes. Their engagement, just 2 months old, had been celebrated throughout Riverdale Heights. The community that had once faced destruction had become a family of sorts, united by their shared history and collective triumph. On stage, Principal Washington approached the microphone. "Welcome, everyone, to this special evening. 1 year ago, our community stood at a crossroads. Today, we gather to celebrate not just our survival, but our transformation." The audience applauded as she continued. "The Charlotte Belfort Memorial Scholarship Fund will provide 5 students each year with full college tuition, prioritizing those interested in medicine, public service, and community development." Before we announce our first recipients, I'd like to invite Latasha Hawkins to the stage. Taking a deep breath, Latasha rose and walked to the podium, scanning the audience until she found Zoe's beaming face in the second row, sitting between Mrs. Patterson and, surprisingly, Clarissa Belfort. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Latasha began. "A year ago, I stood in William Belfort's study, terrified but determined to protect my daughter and our community. I could never have imagined that moment would lead to this one." She paused, gathering her thoughts. The story of Riverdale Heights is not just about surviving a powerful man's greed. It's about what happens when we refuse to be defined by our circumstances, when we insist on writing our own endings. The audience nodded in agreement, many wiping away tears. The Charlotte Belfort Memorial Scholarship isn't named for the man who tried to destroy us, but for his daughter, a little girl who, in her final days, showed us the power of simple kindness. Charlotte never got to grow up, go to college, or fulfill her dreams. But through these scholarships, other children will. Latasha looked directly at Clarissa, who sat with quiet dignity beside Zoe. The two had formed an unexpected bond over the past year, united by their connection to Charlotte's memory. "Transformation rarely comes without pain," Latasha continued. "Our community suffered. Families were frightened. Trust was broken. But from that suffering came strength. From that fear came courage. From that broken trust came a new foundation of community solidarity that can never be shaken." She gestured to the renovated auditorium around them, just one of many improvements funded by the Belfort Trust. "The buildings are nice," she acknowledged with a smile. "But the real transformation is in us, in how we now look out for each other, in how we've learned that our greatest power lies not in wealth or position, but in our capacity for compassion and our commitment to justice." Turning to the side of the stage, she nodded. "And now, I'm honored to introduce our first scholarship recipients, selected by a committee of Riverdale residents and educators. 5 students walked onto the stage, each carrying a symbol of their intended field of study: a stethoscope, a law book, an architectural model, a teacher's apple, and a social worker's handbook. These young people represent the future of Riverdale Heights, Latasha announced proudly. And thanks to the Charlotte Belfort Memorial Scholarship, their education is fully funded through graduate school if they choose to continue. The audience erupted in applause as each student stepped forward to receive their certificate. The last recipient was a surprise to many. Jerome's son, Malcolm, now headed to pre-med at Howard University. Malcolm Jenkins, Latasha announced, whose father's courage in sharing crucial information helped save our community, will be studying pediatric pulmonology, inspired by his work with young asthma patients at our community clinic. As the ceremony concluded, Zoe bounded onto the stage, throwing her arms around her mother. At 8 years old, she had grown taller and stronger, her asthma now properly managed and rarely troubling her. "Did I do okay?" she whispered to Latasha. "You were perfect, baby," Latasha assured her. Zoe had insisted on presenting a special gift to each scholarship recipient, a small purple giraffe pin in memory of Charlotte. As the crowd mingled at the reception afterward, Clarissa approached Latasha, her expression serene despite the lingering sadness in her eyes. "That was a beautiful ceremony," she said softly. "Charlotte would have loved it." "I think she would have," Latasha agreed. "How are you doing?" Clarissa considered the question thoughtfully. "Better than I deserve, perhaps. The divorce was finalized last month. William has another 11 years before parole eligibility." "Do you visit him?" "Occasionally. He's changed. Working in the prison library, teaching literacy classes." She shook her head slightly. "It doesn't erase what he did, but at least he's trying to be useful." They watched as Zoe chatted animatedly with Malcolm Jenkins about his upcoming studies. "She's remarkable," Clarissa observed. "So much like Charlotte in spirit, though their circumstances were so different." "She asks about Charlotte sometimes," Latasha admitted. "Wonders if she's watching over us." "What do you tell her?" "That I believe she is. That friendship doesn't end with death." Clarissa nodded, blinking back tears. "The trust board meeting is next week. We'll be reviewing proposals for the next phase of community development." "Marcus mentioned expanding the health clinic," Latasha said. "The pediatric wing is already at capacity." "It's on the agenda." Clarissa hesitated. "I've also been thinking about establishing a research grant for pediatric lung diseases," in both girls' names. The suggestion touched Latasha deeply. "I think that would be wonderful." As the evening wound down, Latasha found herself standing outside the school with Marcus and Zoe, gazing up at the stars appearing in the twilight sky. "Mom?" Zoe asked, her voice thoughtful. "Do you think we would have ever met Charlotte if her dad hadn't been so mean?" The innocent question gave Latasha pause. "I don't know, baby. Sometimes life takes strange paths to bring people together. I'm glad I got to be her friend, even if it was just for a little while," Zoe said. "And I'm glad our neighborhood is better now, and kids can go to college, and the clinic helps people who are sick." Marcus put his arm around Latasha's shoulders. "Your mom made all that happen, Zoe. She's the real hero of this story." Latasha shook her head. "We all did it together. That's the point. No one person could have saved Riverdale Heights alone. It took all of us, standing up for what's right." As they walked home through the revitalized streets of their neighborhood, Latasha reflected on the journey of the past year. The humiliation in Belfort's garden seemed like a lifetime ago. The frightened, desperate single mother she'd been had transformed into a community leader, a voice for justice, and soon a wife. Their new house, modest but comfortable, with a garden Zoe tended carefully, came into view. On the porch sat a small memorial Zoe had created, a purple giraffe, a framed photo of Charlotte, and a quote Zoe had chosen herself. "True friendship leaves footprints on your heart." Inside, on Latasha's desk, lay the final draft of her book manuscript, Standing Ground: How One Community Fought Back and Won. The publisher had been enthusiastic, seeing it as both an inspiring memoir and a practical guide for other communities facing similar threats. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges: Zoe's occasional asthma flare-ups, the ongoing work of community development, the complex emotions that surfaced whenever Charlotte's name was mentioned. But these challenges were faced together, with the strength that comes from knowing you're not alone. Later that night, after Zoe was asleep, Latasha sat on the porch swing with Marcus, watching the neighborhood settle into evening quiet. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about power," she replied. "How I used to think it belonged only to people like Belfort, people with money and connections and influence. And now?" She smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "Now I know better. Real power isn't about controlling others. It's about standing firm in your own truth, even when the world tries to silence you. It's about protecting what matters, no matter the cost. And sometimes, it's about finding the courage to forgive, not because someone deserves it, but because you deserve peace." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "That's why Riverdale Heights loves you. You didn't just save our homes, you showed us our own strength." "We saved each other," Latasha corrected gently, "and in the process, we created something beautiful from something terrible." From inside the house came Zoe's voice, calling out in her sleep as she sometimes did. Latasha went to check on her, finding her daughter peaceful, a small smile on her sleeping face. On the bedside table sat the purple stuffed giraffe, Charlotte's final gift, now well-loved and slightly worn. Beside it lay Zoe's inhaler, used less frequently these days, but still a reminder of the fragility and preciousness of breath, of life itself. Latasha gently tucked the blanket around her daughter's shoulders, overwhelmed by love and gratitude. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together not just as mother and daughter, but as part of a community that had learned the true meaning of solidarity. As she returned to the porch in Marcus's waiting arms, Latasha gazed out at Riverdale Heights, the neighborhood that had refused to be erased, the community that had found its voice, the home that had been saved not by wealth or influence, but by courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to justice. In the quiet evening, with stars emerging overhead and the soft sounds of a thriving community around them, Latasha finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of their victory, not just over William Belfort, but over fear itself. Some battles change more than circumstances. They change souls. And in that transformation lies the most profound victory of all. The end.
Thank you so much for watching this story to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if you did. Mr. Lovely Stories is committed to giving you the best and most touching stories that teach valuable life lessons. So stick around. We have another beautiful story showing on the screen for you. Click on it to watch it now. Always remember, we love you.